Thank you. Welcome, everybody. We're still waiting for Councillor Peterhouse, but I'm sure he won't be too long. I'm Councillor Lynn Stagg, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. Some housekeeping information. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. We will assemble at the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street, past the University Park building. In order to comply with Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign up when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Please can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they're finished, otherwise the camera will remain on you. Right, introductions. Councillor Heaney.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Graham Heaney, I'm the Labour Group spokesperson on traffic and transportation.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Peter Harris.
I'm Councillor Scott Peter Harris. I am the Conservative Group spokesperson for traffic and transportation.
Michelle.
Good afternoon, Michelle Lovesafer, Travel Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Chai.
Good afternoon, Chai Sharp, Active Travel Officer, Portsmouth City Council.
Good afternoon, Bethan Mose, Transport Delivery Manager.
Thank you. Jo.
Hello, Joanne Eldridge, Monitoring and Evaluation Officer in the Transport Delivery Team, Portsmouth City Council.
Tim. Can't hear you. Can you speak up a little bit louder? It's caught on the...
Hello, Tim Reynolds, Group Accountant, Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Peter Shelley, I'm Transport Development Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Thank you. Felicity.
Good afternoon, Felicity Tidbury, Assistant Director for Transport.
And Mr Dobson.
Yes, good afternoon everybody. Mike Dobson representing the Friendsville Portsmouth Association.
And I've got one announcement to make, and that is that there will be no access to any IT systems between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. tonight. This downtime will affect internet connections and telephony from all corporate sites, as well as remote working, including staff working from home. So you've got an evening off, everybody. This downtime is necessary because our internal supplier has identified a fault that has recently been affecting our ability to provide you with a stable network connection, and urgent work needs to be carried out to rectify this. We apologise for any inconvenience this may cause. Okay. So
just to clarify,
yes.
That means that we can't access the councillor's email system, presumably?
It does indeed. Anybody who wants to access the council stuff cannot do it between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. So we either need to finish very early and get home so you can get an hour in, or you have to leave it until after 11 p.m. tonight.
Yeah, or maybe tomorrow, early morning.
Thank you. I don't think we have any apologies, because the apologies were all here. Any members' interest? Councillor Heaney.
No members' interest to declare, no.
Councillor Peter Harris.
No interest to declare.
Thank you. Right, we will go on to item... Yes. Item number 3, which I think, is it you going to present this, Peter? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. Just to give a bit of background, on 4th of April this year, Portsmouth City Council was advised that it had been offered an indicative funding allocation of up to £48.3 million towards its bus service improvement plan. That funding was conditional upon submission and implementation of a transformational enhanced partnership. Such a partnership was approved by Cabinet on the 21st of June and submitted by the 30th of June. The Department for Transport required some additional text for clarification, and once this was agreed, funding has been approved once the enhanced partnership is implemented. The report today is to seek approval for that implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Thank you. I do have some questions, actually, because I wasn't able to attend the briefing because it was the time was changed and I was at work and couldn't do it. I'll start at the beginning of the document rather than jump around, and I'll work my way through, and I've got some pointers here that I want to ask questions of. So just to start with the recommendation, it says, notes the Department of Transport require additional text in the enhanced partnership plan and scheme. What is that, and when do we have to provide it?
Peter.
Why?
Thank you, Councillor. That was provided following the submission of the report on 30th of June. It was for clarification. For example, it required that the operators reinvest any savings they made as a result of improvements back into the local bus network. And it asked for us to explain in greater detail the reasons behind some of the report as originally written. That then went to the leader, deputy leader and portfolio holder. It didn't change anything that was previously said before, it just added our thinking behind it and made it clearer to the Department for Transport what our intentions were.
My next question is in relation to the background. It talks about offered an indicative funding allocation of up to 48, whatever. When does indicative become actual and real? And do we know what the actual real is likely to be?
I'm pleased to say that once we agreed the revised text with Department for Transport, the indicative funding became a real award, subject to us completing the statutory consultation which we have and going through the implementation today. The last tens of thousands may not be identical to the indicative sum, but it's certainly 48.3 million plus.
I've only got 3 or 4 questions, so I'm not going to spend hours. I've just marked them up so I can find them as they're fiddling around with a bit of paper trying to work out where they are. I'm going on to page 45, where we talk about what things are being considered for subject to funding, and we're into section A3, and there's a whole list of things there. And there's just one that I was slightly curious about. I mean, the bottom one talked about review the physical layout of local bus stops and redesign, fill in lay-bys stroke add borders, and it says borders, B-O-A-R-D-E-R-S, where needed to improve bus access egress for passengers and buses. So I'm obviously aware that some bus stops, there is a sort of, essentially a lay-by type where they move into. So are we proposing to get rid of all of those, or something different, and what do you mean by borders? Because I'm assuming, are we talking about raised pavements to allow people to board more easily? Is that what is proposed? I'm not quite clear.
Thank you. Happy to answer that, Councillor. It's really looking at bus stops almost on a stop-by-stop basis to see how they fit in with local parking situations. It's the geometry of the bus stop. Is it difficult for the bus to pull alongside the curb for people to easily get on and off? It's to tackle the situation you've no doubt seen where, as you get off the bus, immediately in front of you there's a litter bin. It's improving the environment from an accessibility point of view, both the accessibility to the for the bus to the stop and the passengers to the bus. In some cases, a lay-by might not be doing the bus any good if it has difficulty rejoining traffic, but that would depend on road widths and the impact on other traffic. A bus border is something about the width of a parking bay, a bit like the more recently known parklets, builds the pavement out so the bus can just stop parallel to the parked cars and load passengers on and off without having to pull in and out. And if it can do that, again, without interrupting the traffic flow, that minimises the curb it requires and it minimises the delay to the service. Very much stop specific rather than a one size fits all.
Moving on to page 47, it talks about early, as one of the measures, early journeys on core routes from 0430 to 2300. What do we define as core routes?
So again, those are the most well-used routes. So the 1, 2, 3, 7 and 8, we've started journeys this week from 4:30 in the morning. And from the new year, it'll be the Stagecoach 21 and 23 services. So it's really designed on the busiest routes to get people to work who might currently have difficulty getting to different places of employment, and extend the operating day so the buses will be starting an hour or so earlier than now. What we also have taken a decision is that we recognise that many residents live in council property across the border, if you like, so those buses will start early from Fareham, from Horndean, Clanfield and Lee Park as well. So the whole network, the busiest routes on the network, the 10-minute frequency type services will now start from 4:30 in the morning on Monday to Friday.
So it's a combination of route usage plus geography. So it's not just geographical core, it's usage core as well. So it'll be a mixture of both. That's
Right, Councillor.
That clarifies it. I now understand fully what that means. I'll scribble a note here. I can't read my own handwriting now. What have I said here? Oh yes, on page 50, under section C3 service levels, the second paragraph, it says the operators will proactively investigate the following service improvements. They will work with Portsmouth City Council to establish whether they can be delivered commercially, and if not, the level of revenue support required. Oh no, I've checked the wrong one. There was something else there. That's not the right one. Where we talk about providing other services. Oh dear. What have I done here? I think I marked the wrong one. I'm going to show, I think I marked the wrong one. I'm making notes and marking it. And can I come back? Because it wasn't the one I was thinking of. So I'll let Scott have his say. Can I come back if I can find it?
Have you got any more questions?
No more questions. That's the last question. So
I'll pass on to Councillor Peter Harris.
Thank you for that, Graham. Just also, there's a couple of questions on Appendix A, which is the what's the enhanced partnership planning scheme, which obviously has been attached. So if you go to page 10 on that, it talks about bus service infrastructure. I'm just going to link it from page 10 to page 41. So I think it's page 41 or 40. So please bear with me, Peter. Let me just check it. I've got it on my screen. So it talks about obviously the fares and the difference in fares between first bus services and stagecoach. So obviously I think it's typically, it says first bus you can get a ticket to Cosham, for example. With first bus for an adult single is £3.50, and with stagecoach it's £2.55. And we talk about, when we go further up to page 40, improvements in fares and ticketing, and obviously there'll be a simple value fares across a smaller range of products. How are we going to deal with the disparity between stagecoach and first? Because while this is obviously part of improving the services, there is going to be some difference in price because they're two different commercial entities effectively. We can't really make them have the same price, can we? Can you explain that?
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor. Well, you're absolutely right. These are commercial businesses which have set their own fare levels. There are two ways we're tackling that. We've said to First that we want them to go to a more graduated fare scale. They currently have quite large zones, and if you're one stop the wrong side of a zone and go 2 stops down the road, you get paid as though you were travelling several miles. And we want something, the more traditional system which Stagecoach do, where the fares go up every half a mile in more gradual increments. So that will make them more comparable. It won't alter the absolute levels of fares. You're correct on that. Only market forces will do that. But we are looking to bring out a range of value fares, for example, an evening ticket, a family ticket. We're looking at a job seekers ticket, and all these tickets will be available on both First and Stagecoach. So if you're visiting a business or a relative who happens to be on the other bus network, you've got a ticket that'll take you through. So we're leaving their core commercial businesses to fund their investment, but we're saying we want some things like a family rover ticket, we want something for job seekers. We're looking to raise the reduced fare from under 16 to under 19, and the operators are signed up to that. And we have some funding through the bus service improvement plan to get that going. We're hoping some of these initiatives will become self-funding in time.
That's very good. Thank you for that, Peter. That's very comprehensive.
Can I just add in this? Am I right in thinking that some of the routes that the buses take to get to the same destination are different? I'm thinking, for example, if I want to go to Galmorth Keys from where I live, I can catch the 21 or the 2. The number 2 takes a much longer journey because it goes all the way down Copton and Milton Road and then along Albert Road, etc., whereas the 21 is much shorter and goes down Queen Street.
Yes, that is correct, but I think, and customers will focus where they know the fares are, but we're trying to demystify it, we're trying to make it simple, and as Councillor Baker Harris has said, there are some anomalies which, if you're an unsuspecting passenger, will seem very strange.
Yes.
And we're trying to address that.
I think it's more of a case of we don't want to have a two-tier bus system, where obviously you can go to the same place, but it's going to cost you more if you go with a certain operator. I think that's a concerning thing for residents. I don't really see that, and especially with the current, obviously, cost of living issues that people are suffering, I think we want to ensure that people are keeping as much in their pocket as possible. So no, I think it's really helpful, Peter. The other thing is not so much really about bus networks, it's about the terms of reference about the partnership board. The partnership board comprises obviously of one from each large operator, one of the small operators. It's obviously chaired by the cabinet member and one other representative of the city council. It's not really been open to opposition spokespeople, and I can sort of understand why, but it would just be nice if we could be briefed on that, obviously what goes on there, if that's okay. I mean, I think it's sensible, because the state of flux that the council's in with elections every 3 out of 4 years, I think there could be, any one of us in the next 5 years could be sitting in the cabinet member's chair. So I think that would be a sensible thing to do, just so we can keep abreast of the situation of what's going on, because this is a long-term issue that's going to be dealt with over many, many years. So I suspect that you could have one of each political party actually in the chair at one time. So if I'm happy with that, I'm happy to suggest that if members are happy with it.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm particularly of letting opposition people know. I think the report needs to come out from each meeting.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Pate Harris? Have you found the right one now?
I found the right one. It's actually on the back of the first one, the second one that I did, so I'm not looking for it. It was the Appendix B measures, page 47, 48. It was on page 48, actually, when it talks about the measures that we're going to bring under B3, the possible extra measures, and it talks about use conventional and demand responsive transport to fill gaps in the network and for unserved sections of the community. Not quite sure I understand what that actually is. Could you say what is envisaged in that? Conventional and demand responsive transport to fill the gaps.
So there's a couple of things. Conventional are your traditional bus running along the road, I'm sure you know that. Demand responsive might be something closer to dial-a-ride. It's a service which is flexible. We're looking at it to get down roads that the big buses can't get down. The way we see it, it probably runs to a schedule, but actually only operates if somebody makes a call and books it. So it's environmentally friendly, will allow us to go places we don't go now. We're also looking, and another report comes onto this, on routes like the 1314, which you've mentioned in the past. We have some money through the bus service improvement plan to say, well, could we do something better with that route? We can't replace our own money, but we could do additional journeys, additional parts of town. And in terms of unserved communities, we're also alert that it's not just geographical communities, it may be groups that we don't reach very well. We have funding to both communicate with them, perhaps understand their needs, and look to see what we can do really so everybody has the best access to the services in the city.
Anything else? Okay.
There was a more general question, because obviously it talks about this commencing on the 8th, which is today, so it effectively commences from today, this plan. But Peter sort of mentioned, and I think I heard him correctly, that some of the enhancements have already started. I think you said early buses. Maybe I misheard you. But the main point I want to know is, can we be sort of kept informed about the timetable of the actual improvements, beginning and when they're introduced? So rather than waiting for months to find out, but actually if they're going to be introduced, if we're doing something and it's coming in, that we know about it sort of at the time.
The timetable should be on the bus companies.
Well, I mean, things like timetables are sort of thing we'd expect them to do, but I'm particularly thinking about some of the newer things that are coming in that we potentially could fund out of the very light money we've now actually got. And so, when are we going to bring, I'll just pick one at random. I'm not asking about camera enforcement on bus lanes. So that will take a while to develop. We need to obviously approve it, etc. So when that's going to come, is it going to come here, or is it just going to be done as a delegated matter? How will we know when it's happening and how these things are being brought in? So I just want some sense of information about how it happens, so we know. Particularly, obviously, our two spokespersons, but I'm sure other members would be interested in that too.
Peter?
No, that's a very good, very good point, and we want members to be as well informed as possible. You're right, we wanted to move ahead with these early morning journeys, even though we're not actually if it's approved, making the enhanced partnership till today. Everything else will be on a future timetable. There's both a programme board and a stakeholder engagement group, but I will take away to Chloe on our team who does communications and understand how best we can make sure that members are fully informed, because a lot of what's in the EP has come from members' input, so we want to keep that circle going. It's a living document. Some of the ideas won't work, some of the circumstances will change, so yes, we'll take that away and make sure we can best engage with you so that you're fully on board and contributing.
Thank you, Peter. Right, come back to the recommendations.
Councillor Stagg, just a quick one. Can I ask a quick question? Sorry. It's just something on buses. It's important. No, I mean, it's just about on the appendix that I was looking at, Appendix A, it actually goes down to page 39, the requirements of existing buses and the admission standards. Am I correct in thinking that we've still got 6 buses that are Euro 3 buses? Because that's what the paper says. It says we've got 2 with First and 4 with Stagecoach. I was under the impression that they would all been retrofitted by now.
It may be an omission. That table, I think, was back in the summer. It may be an even earlier date than now, but you're absolutely correct. All the buses running on regular services are now Euro 6.
Can we just, obviously, just out for clarity, Peter, not in this meeting, I think it would be good that we all have a clarity, because I think I was under the impression that Euro 6, this table says different, and obviously it's in a published report. If we can get that updated and sent out to members, just so we can be sure that when residents ask us, are their buses, are they all compliant with the clean air zone? More so for my colleagues in the taxi trade, shall I say, that will ask me and say, why are we allowing this to happen when they have to pay, if they have a vehicle that is over. So I think it would be just good to know that as well, because it's not clear in the table where we are from what we've been told and what's in here.
No, to certainly take that away. Thank you.
Any more, Councillor Peter Harris? I can carry on, can I? Good, thank you. Right, back to the recommendations. I've noted the contents of the report. Noted that the additional text has already been done and approved. Approved the enhanced partnership plan and scheme, and approved the implementation of the enhanced partnership plan and scheme from today. So thank you. Thank you for the actual report as well. It's very thorough. I realise that some things have, I mean, it's an ever-changing picture, isn't it? So I know some things have been updated since this was written. So, but thank you for doing it. Lovely. Thank you. Right.
Are we allowed to make a comment? Sorry, it's me. Are we allowed to make a comment? No. It's well, I just wanted to say that to thank the office for the report. It's really, I found it really interesting to read, and also I think it's really potentially quite exciting about what we could do. I mean, there were some things in here which were potentially controversial, I'm sure, but it's good to see that this is coming forward, which is why I was asking about when we can get things done, and so hopefully this will make a real impact and difference to the way buses operate in the city, and will make it easier for using buses. And now I'm qualified to have the free bus pass. I'm definitely going to be using them a lot more.
Yes, I think I'd like to congratulate the whole team for actually putting in the bid as well, because obviously it was fantastically well received bid, and I believe it was we had the most money out of any metropolitan or county area. Am I right?
It's the second highest outside a combined mayoral area or a PTE.
So that says a lot for our officers. That's probably one of the reasons why they keep getting nicked by other councils. But thank you very much. Right, on to agenda item 4, which is the Portsmouth-supported bus services. Peter, I think you're doing this as well, aren't you?
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. It's a slightly longer report, so it's a slightly longer introduction, if I may, set the context. Portsmouth City Council has a statutory duty and powers under the Transport Act 1985 to consider the provision of bus services where it considers appropriate, that there is an unmet need which is not being provided by commercial bus services. The City Council currently has contracts for 5 bus services, most of which were originally due to be renewed in December 2020. But at that time, the pandemic had significantly reduced the number of people using the buses, and bus services were relying on funding from central government and local transport authorities, including Portsmouth City Council. This funding has enabled the bus industry to survive, but central government funding has been in a series of short-term funding tranches, creating uncertainty. At the decision day on 28th of July, Contract extension was approved till the 31st of July 2023, as the situation was expected to have stabilised by then, allowing an effective procurement process to be undertaken. Central government funding was due to end in September 2022, and the results of the Department for Transport required network review, which required funding for weekday journeys on the 13th and 14th, were due to be known. In the event, government funding through the bus recovery grant was extended to March 2023, and this report reflects that whilst giving time for an effective procurement process. This report seeks approval to further extend the contracts for these from 31st of July 2023 to 28th of October 2023. Approval is also sought to re-tender the existing contracts and to secure any necessary local bus services following the ending of government bus recovery grant in March 2023. It also seeks approval to provide improvements to supported services using funding from the Bus Service Improvement Plan, reflecting surveys of users. A paper will be brought back to a Traffic and Transportation Committee meeting following completion of the procurement process and to recommend awards. That paper will also deal with any short-term procurements following the cessation of the bus recovery grant in March 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Peter Harris, any questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Comments?
There's just a couple of questions, and then I'll just do a couple of comments as well. So, am I correct in, Peter, in believing this is the third time that we've extended this contract? Actually, no, this is the fourth time that we've done it 3 times before.
I think, yes, you're absolutely right. There's a table showing 4 extensions on page 3, page 77 of the report. And originally it was due to be renewed in December 2020, and with the pandemic going on and all the external funding, that wasn't considered appropriate. We've tried to get back out to market as soon as possible, but in discussions with procurement, it was felt that we wouldn't get a realistic response from a range of operators. So the plan now is, by that extension, we can engage more widely, give all the operators a fair chance to bid and get the best value for the citizens of Portsmouth.
Absolutely. I understand that obviously this has been a significant issue in getting it out to tender again. And so I'm never comfortable when there's waivers being given time after time. I always think it's comfortable to have an open tender process, but I understand the need for it for the effectiveness and cost. And I'm just going to come on to the element of cost because the report actually states that there'll be more money drawn down from the parking reserve, I believe. I think of about £41,000 potentially. Does that take into account the inflationary pressures that potentially could be coming down the line?
It does, yes. So it's 51,000, but you're right.
51,000, yes. Sorry. It doesn't actually, I mean, it states inflationary pressures in the report when they are given the extension, but it doesn't actually state in the actual financial comments. So it's just a bit unsure whether that is included as well.
Yes, it includes an uplift, a contract uplift from the period from July through till October.
No, thank you. That's only a bit of clarity on that. And the only comment I really have on it is so much is obviously I know that it's been extended 4 times. I think this should be the last time that we take this step. I really believe that extending again doesn't send the right message. I think we should be as pragmatic as possible, as we have been, but also I think we need to get a bit stronger in our relationship with the bus companies, because I think at the moment in this relationship they seems to be the one that gets everything they want and we don't get everything that we wish. So I think there is a case for us to be strong with them and actually go out to tender and actually show that we can actually get other people that want to operate the service, because I think there is almost a monopoly of First Bus. I'm going to use them as an example, and Stagecoach in the city for a long time, and I think it would be nice to freshen things up a bit and maybe give them a kick up the backside at the same time. So that's just my comments on those.
I would just say there that if, of course, we got more people to use the buses, then the bus companies would be earning enough money that we wouldn't need to end up supporting them.
No,
so
I think
you're.
I think
BSIP is partly, well, a lot about is making bus journeys more appealing to people.
I don't disagree with you there, Councillor Stagg. I think making bus journeys more appealing to people is important. But then we also have the similarity. We also have a similar issue where we have I'm going to use the example of voice scooters and barrel bikes, and we've actually got proven data that voice scooters take people away from bus journeys. So, I mean, we can't have it all. It's a very difficult situation that we're in, that we're trying to do all these modes of transport, but we can't have everything. And I think sometimes, I mean, I don't want to say that I just think we need to look at other operators for the bus services, because I think I gave the disparity earlier between First and Stagecoach on very similar journeys, and there's almost £1 difference in them, and and effectively that could be a lot of money for people. They're doing that 3 or 4 times a week over the course of a month. So I think there is a time to actually go out to tender and to really test the market. But I mean, it's good that we're trying to get people around the city, and I do support the bus improvement plans.
They do go out for tender every year, so it depends on whether the bus companies are interested enough to actually put in. Am I right in saying that?
Well, the services in this report have not been tendered because of the pandemic, and that's what we're seeking approval of. I think everybody's on the same page here. We want to get the tenders out in a timely way to get a good response and to potentially get new bidders to come into the city.
Yes, that's what I meant, that we don't automatically go to First and say, can you do these routes?
No.
They do have to sort of make an effort. Councillor Heaney.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Zag. I do have a few questions. I'm going through the recommendations. I'm going through each page as I go. 2.3 talks about the improvement of a procurement strategy. I presume that's because we last procured in 2016 and therefore we need to update our procurement strategy. Would that be a right assumption about the way that's done?
I think that's a good summary, Councillor.
Okay,
We've been
right,
working with the procurement service to update our approach.
Okay. The other one is then, it talks about in 2.5 to procure any necessary local bus services following the ending of bus recovery grant in March 2023 to October 23 with delegated authority. I can't remember, and so on and so on. So we're anticipating the possibility that one or other company might cease a particular service at some point, and therefore we would have to then re-tender, and presumably if they're ceasing the service they wouldn't be re-tendering for it, they wouldn't be putting in a bid, so we're going to have to look for somebody else. Is that a correct understanding of that?
That's almost there, Councillor. Yes, we're covering off the eventuality, as in the September review, that some operators may come back, as passenger numbers have not really built back to pre-COVID levels yet, so they wouldn't be able to run it without subsidy. Our experience is that the people, they would just be as likely to bid for the service as any other operator, so they wouldn't walk away, but they're just saying they can't cover it from the fare box income.
Okay. So in a sense, it comes to my next question about the 1314, because it says that the 1314 has now become a commercial route, becoming a subsidised service. At what point did the bus company approach us for that? Because it was presumably commercial and it's now going to be subsidised, and it's being recommended in this report the Monday to Friday service be subsidised, because it was originally just the Sunday and the Alf Peak. But so when did they come and tell us that they couldn't run the Monday to Friday? Is that information you can give me in public? I mean, I would have asked these questions a week or so ago if I could have gone to the meeting. But
No, it's you're perfectly right to ask, Councillor. It was the Department for Transport required all authorities across the country to undertake a network review. That when they were planning to cease their bus recovery grant funding at the end of September, First approached us. I think it may have been picked up in the last report. I think the writing of this one is a bit ambiguous on that. They came back to us and said they could no longer continue to run that, and some other services. They asked for funding for the 22 and the 1314. They had also asked for funding for the 25, but in fact that proved to be better than they expected, so they backtracked away from that. But they were following the Department for Transport sort of formula that they should, all bus operators across the country should work with their local authorities.
Okay. I'll come back to that in a minute, because I've got a comment I want to make about that as well, but I'll just come to the last question I have, which is on paragraph, where are we? It's about the legal implications. Where did I go? we talk about, I've lost the section, it's where we talk about the fact that we'll be potentially up for challenge because we haven't done the procurement exercise. So who might challenge us? Who are we worried about a legal challenge from about this?
That's 8.4, Councillor.
8.5. Sorry, yes.
Yes. There's,
yeah, the exposure of the council to legal or financial reputation until they are re-tendered. So who's going to be, who are we at risk from? Do we know?
traditionally in these situations it would be other bus operators who feel they've been excluded from the opportunity to bid. So that could be an independent operator outside the city, or it could be Stagecoach. We did work with procurement at the time, and we really felt with a combination of the way costs were going up, the low passenger numbers and the national shortage of bus drivers, that wasn't considered a substantial risk. It's rightly identified as a potential risk, but with the state of the bus supply market, that wasn't considered that we would have other people coming forward. Had we felt they would have, we would have gone out to tender.
So it's a sort of theoretical risk rather than an actual risk. We haven't got loads of bus companies champing at the bit to come and take our services. So. Going back to my comment, I mean, reading this, and if I've misunderstood this, please correct me, but it looks like we're in a situation where, with the government ending the bus recovery grant, there is a possibility that some services could be ceased. And at a time when we're trying to encourage more bus use, but we're not allowed to use any of the bus recovery money to bring things back right to the status quo, because these are services presumably that we're operating at but are then lost. Is that correct, that we couldn't use money to restore those services?
Well, we can't use the BSIP money to subsidise services, I think. Am I correct? But we can, if we can improve the offers, such as the quicker routes, that's where the CERT scheme comes in, etc. That can help. Am I right?
Oh, you're both right, really. Yes, there is the potential that an operator will walk away from a service and put a budget pressure on the City Council, depending on what we decide is a need to be filled. We can use bus service improvement plan to enhance services, so we're looking at options to perhaps run better than what's there now. We can't use it to directly replace our own money.
Yeah, well, I understand that. It's a really sort of bizarre situation where money is taken away with one hand and given back with another, and you do wonder, don't you, about what
That's
the thinking is around sustainable bus services. If they're going to make it a serious effort, you don't want to basically, puncture the tyre before you've got the vehicle moving, so to speak, by taking away their resources. But anyway, that is not in our hands, I have to say. I mean, I think I understand the reasons for this, and I think I understand the issue around procurement. Just going back to 1314 again, it talks about us needing to go, because we've now taken it in as a subsidised service, to go and retender it in 3 months or so. So we will definitely have to do that. We won't be sort of saying, oh, maybe not, or if the company isn't worried about it, will we continue with them? What happens with the 1314? Because it says we should retender it in, quickly, within 3 months or so. So is it something that we'll another bus operator come in, or will there only be one tenderer? I don't quite understand how it will work, because it seems to be a bit of an empty exercise, because nobody's championing for it. The bus company's giving it up, so we're retendering it. Someone might say, well, we don't care, we're not interested, so we just carry on as we are.
Peter?
I haven't expressed that very well, but I think you know what I'm saying.
I think it comes back to the likelihood of legal challenge. And our intention is to run the 1314 in an enhanced basis through till October. So it will be beyond the 3 months. For pragmatic reasons, there's the potential challenge as there was back in September. We don't think that's likely. We are engaging with all the operators and new potential bidders, so there will be an opportunity for them to mobilise and be in a position to run the services properly from the end of October. What we will also do, and I'm sure we'll be talking to yourself, Councillor, is using BSIP money over that period to improve the offer on the 1314, so it's not just one bus an hour each way round, meeting at the outer end. So we're following we are going to work on a business as usual basis, really with the best outcome in mind.
That's all, thank you.
Right. I think we've got to get the message out that it's use it or lose it. which we've been saying, I know in Baffin's ward, been saying it ever since I was elected, and that's nearly 16 years ago. So, because we had the 19, yes,
Yes.
etc. So we've
Well,
got
I
to
would use
encourage people to use the buses more.
I-
But then putting lots of things in place to make it more appealing should help, she said, crossing her fingers.
I mean, I would use it if it was a better service, not 1 hour, because for me, for work, it's not a good service. I go somewhere else to get the bus because it doesn't meet needs, so it
I was
won't
coming
actually
back
have
from somewhere
passengers.
the other week, and
Yeah.
I was waiting for the 13, 14, and people waiting there, and it was a mother and son, an elderly lady, sort of but my age, and she was saying it's a pity she couldn't stay longer with him, but she had to go because that was the last bus. So I think things like that make life a bit difficult, and that is when a lot of people don't use the buses as much.
I mean, I think the problem is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. If you don't have the service that people can effectively use, then they won't use it. And I was sort of thinking about whether BSIC will allow us to do sort of loss leader funding, so that basically a service is put on that it won't actually make any money, but it might, after a while, encourage people to use it. Because the private companies aren't going to do that because they're not interested in doing that. But sometimes you have to provide the service before you have the demand.
Yeah.
The demand will come when you have the service, and that's probably what we need to think about. But anyway, I'm going back on the other debate.
Scott, sorry.
It's just I do have a question on 8.4 because I think Councillor Heaney stumbled upon something that I've looked at and I haven't really taken it in until now. So the legal implications are important because obviously the decision Councillor Stagg's going to be making does expose the council to legal, financial and reputational risk. And while it is limited and it could be quite low bar, the risk is still there. And I think that's an issue. I mean, have we laid the groundwork potentially for that to happen if someone does pose a legal challenge because they don't feel that they've had a fair crack at tendering for these services? Have we laid that groundwork just in case that happens?
We've certainly met with our legal team to talk through all the likelihoods and the options, and that's reflected in what is said there. We're also engaging with all the potential bidders for services, and we feel through that market engagement we would be aware if there were unhappy people out there, and that it's potential other bidders who are the likely people to take action. And to be honest, even for example when we tendered the open top bus service back in the summer, we went out widely on that. And Stagecoach said with the driver situation they couldn't even bid. So that's got us to where we are now. So yes, we've talked it through with legal and with procurement. There is a balance of risk here. Our professional advice, it is the best way to go, and the potential bidders gives them a better chance to get their cases in order and give us a good bid.
I always have a concern when we admit liability, because I think that's always the worst place to be when you're starting off that argument. So no, if you're happy and that's the professional advice and we're actually in a good place from a legal perspective, I know why the comments are in there, but it is a concerning that obviously it was 3 years since we've retendered these services, and that's obviously where people could get concerned that if they are going to, when they do eventually tender, that someone's got an unfair advantage, and I don't want that to happen. I want to ensure that everyone's got a level playing field. So I'm going to stick to my advice earlier that I believe that we, as soon as we can after this period of extension, please don't bring this back. Please go for a retender, Peter. I'll be actually very happy for that. And that would be my advice anyway.
That's our intention, Councillor. Thank you.
I don't think we've noticed hordes of bus companies coming in to tender for bus routes that are very poorly subscribed to.
know.
I don't think, anyway. Am I right?
We're going to try and change that situation to get wider interest.
Yes. Lovely, thank you.
Can I just come, I don't want to labour the point too much, but it is quite an interesting one. I assumed from the answer that I've been given that effectively what would happen is we don't tender the service. We are told we should do within 3 months, but we won't tender the service unless someone comes in and makes a request and challenges, and then we'll do it. Is that what we're tending to do to mitigate the risk? And does that effectively mitigate the risk, or should we at least do a tender exercise, even if it proves to be one where we put it out and nobody says anything and the status quo remains?
Well, the procurement advice we have is the reverse of that. There is a danger if we went out now that first, as the incumbent operator with the staff and vehicles in place, would be the only bidder. And then we might find ourselves not having a fair market exploration and not getting a good deal for residents. So our intention, having spoken to legal and procurement, is to start a tender exercise early in the new year, so there's a long enough time. So if it's an out-of-city operator that needs 6 months to get the drivers locally or to buy in the buses, that will start running relatively early in the new year, and to get the best results for the residents and have the new services in place from the end of October.
Because a tender exercise would require us to give them a reasonable period to operate. We couldn't just say a tiny period. We'd have to give them a reasonable period, presumably to be a tender exercise. So I understand that point from what procurement is saying now. I understand the points being made, yeah.
Any more from either of you? Sure? Right. I'll go through this whole list here, right? So I'm approving extending the current supported bus service contract on the 31st of July 2023 to the 28th of October. Note that waiver approval will need to be sought from procurement and legal services in respect to the proposed extensions, and that's already been done, hasn't it, Peter? Approves the development and implementation by the transport services supported by procurement and legal services for procurement strategy to re-tender the bus contracts. That's in hand, right? Approves the use of Portsmouth bus service improvement plan expenditure to enhance services 13, 14 and 25. The 25 is proving a very successful route. Procure any necessary local bus services following the extending of bus recovery grant in March 2023 with delegated authority to the Director of Regeneration consultation with the Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. Notes that a paper will be brought back to a Traffic and Transportation Cabinet meeting following the completion of the procurement process to re-tender the contracts and recommend awards. This paper would also deal with any short-term procurements following the cessation of bus recovery grant in March 2023. So I think we've got every angle covered, haven't we?
That's
Lovely.
the intention.
Yes, lovely. Thank you, Peter. Five now, I think, isn't it? Oh, sorry, I'm talking
Myself.
I'm right, I'll go through that again. Right, it's Shipwrights Way, and Chai, I think you're going to be introducing that.
Yes. So this report is on the Traffic Regulation Order 4322 for Shipwrights Way. Shipwrights Way is a 50-mile long-distance path linking Alice Holt Forest to Portsmouth Historic Dockyard. It passes through Old Portsmouth. This route, it provides a key link to existing facilities on Pier Road and White Hart Road for those walking, wheeling and scooting. We're looking to improve the area around the Square Tower. A number of different improvements were considered when looking at this, and particularly this looks to improve Battery Row and Broad Street. We had a statutory 21-day consultation under TRO 4322 that took place between the 3rd of March 22 and the 23rd of March 22. During this time, we received one objection, which is inside this report, and there was a consultation response from the authority to them. The project basically looks to build out on the Square Tower to reduce the crossing distance over Battery Row, to improve the accessibility, so to add tactiles to the area, and to reduce cornering speeds. Although it's not a speed reduction project, the benefits of the build out will hopefully reduce cornering speeds. It also does not remove any parking that is currently existing, because parking is very constrained in that area, and it looks to move the bus stop away from the existing to make a bus border so that you can board the bus and leave off the road.
Lovely, thank you, Chai.
No problem.
Mr. Dobson, would you like to do your deputation now?
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm representing the Friends of Old Portsmouth Association, or FUPA, a community organisation founded in 1949 to represent the views of the residents of Old Portsmouth. Currently, we have 274 households members, constituting approximately 350 adults. On behalf of the resident and with the authority of the committee, in March I submitted the comments that in Appendix B of the report are presented as being the objection from a single resident. 14 references to FUPA were changed to resident or we, and FUPA is referred to as the objector, rather than correctly placing on the public record that these comments are from a residents' association. This is misleading and discourteous. To be blunt, it's insulting to the local community. FUPA agrees that something needs to be done. The council has been procrastinating since 2011 about the Shipwrights Way, and the Old Portsmouth section remains incomplete, despite all other sections having been completed by 2016. In Old Portsmouth, the route exists only on the map. The disadvantages of the council's proposed solution are: drivers who intentionally speed will not be deterred by narrowing on the bend and may regard it as a welcome challenge to their driving skills. Despite the integrated impact assessment claiming it will encourage cycling, it gives no priority, formal or informal, to pedestrians who wish to cross the road, and it makes no provision for cyclists following the Shipwrights Way. It may create extra conflict between drivers and cyclists following the main road. The consultation appears to be incomplete. Even though this is of regional importance, I can't find any mention of consultation with Hampshire County Council, with the Ramblers, the Long Distance Walking Association, Cycling England or Sustrans. In my FUPA committee role, and on behalf of the residents, I prepared a 4-colour rag diagram to assess the pros and cons. Councillors and Mr Love already have a copy. And with convention, green is good, yellow reasonable, amber is poor, red is bad. Having done this exercise, I recognise that FUPA's previous suggestion of a traffic island is not the best, nor is the option of the raised table. The FUPA assessment, nor is the recommendation for a build-out. The FUPA assessment is that a raised table is the optimum solution. Raised tables have already been installed in many locations around the city and a lot more are planned. However, in none of my site visits with 3 officers over 11 years has anybody considered this solution. There's precedent because one of the council's proposed solutions for the crossing in Broad Street opposite Feltham Row is to have a raised table, and this is facing the hot walls and the arches, which are heritage areas. I'd ask councillors to refer to section 5.1.3. There it says that speed humps and traffic islands were ultimately ruled out due to conservation requirements. Note there's no reference to standards for highways or planning guidance in DMRB, local transport notes or traffic advisory leaflets, so there's insufficient explanation as to why the council selected to build out. Secondly, it's ambiguous about the consideration of conservation principles. Does it mean that both speed humps and traffic islands were ruled out due to conservation requirements, or only traffic islands? I can understand the council's reluctance to have a traffic island with illuminated bollards, although this is odd considering the council's tolerance of motor vehicle parking adjacent to the square tower. I've studied the conservation guidelines. I've also looked at guidance issued by other local authorities, DFT Local Transport Note 1007 on traffic calming and Streets for All. I can't find anything that says that a raised table is incompatible with a conservation area. Madam Chair, my recommendations are: first of all, delay a decision for further evaluation, and secondly, commit the council to signing the Shipwrights Way throughout its route in Old Portsmouth. In conclusion, I bring to your attention the minutes of the Roads and Works Committee that inspected the site of a fatal road traffic incident in Broad Street outside the Sallyport. The City Coroner had written to the committee to draw attention to the dangers to pedestrians from speeding vehicles at this part of the road. This letter to Portsmouth Corporation was sent in July 1928. Let nobody criticise the council for being hasty in planning road safety measures. After 94 years, the residents of Old Portsmouth can wait a few months longer. Please, do it once and do it right and reconsider this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Dobson. Councillor Heaney.
Well, thank Mr Dobson for his deputation, and obviously it's an area that I'm only sort of familiar with as a visitor rather than as a resident, so I obviously am listening carefully to what he has said. I've also been looking at the report. I noticed that the 21-day consultation actually took place in March of this year, and we're now in December. So I'm wondering what the delay was in getting this item to the decision meeting was. That's the first question.
Chai or Michelle, have you got an answer for that?
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. The delay was due to 2 members of staff leaving the team in a relatively short space of time, and we had to recruit additional members of staff and then redistribute the workloads that they had left behind. So that's the reason for the delay.
And presumably it's difficult, I mean, I can imagine going into a position that some work has been done on, difficult to pick up that and run.
Yes, there was obviously a period of time where the officers had to become acclimatised to their roles and to pick up the projects and to learn the historical background. That did feed into the timescale. Once it had been allocated to Chai, he did pick it up very quickly and progress as quickly as possible with it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I must admit I found difficulty in sort of interpreting the diagram because it seemed very small, and I wasn't quite clear that I could get a picture in my mind of what this actually would look like when it was finished. I mean, the description is there, but it's very difficult to get an image of what you think it's going to be. It might have been helpful if we had a bit more of a description, well, something that could have maybe made it a bit clearer. So I'm unclear what this will actually look like when it's finished. I've also got a reference to a question that was posed in the deputation and the response that was given, which talks about the need for safe crossings. It says, unfortunately, the space available does not allow for a marked road crossing refuge. I'm not quite sure where that is referred to, where it means. But it says the most popular place to cross is opposite Feltham Row, and this is the favoured location for an engineered crossing point, which is outside the scope of this project. Also outside of the scope of the map, because I don't know where they're referring to. But I was thinking about what Mr Dobson was saying, and if there's an issue around crossings and safe crossings in this area, wouldn't it be something you would consider as part of the whole road system, you know, because I know we're talking about a particular junction, but there are other things, and why would you do one thing and then not do something else? So I'm not quite clear I understand why we aren't looking at a safe crossing point.
Michelle, do you have an answer to that?
We are looking at other crossing points. The reason that they aren't mentioned in this report is because they have been developed after this report. So there is currently, or has recently closed, a consultation gone out to the residents of Old Portsmouth, which details various options about a crossing point at Peacock Lane, the junction of Peacock Lane and High Street, and Feltham Row, opposite the Hot Walls. It's partially related to funding as well. So the Shipwrights Way is funded from one funding stream, and the 2 crossings that we're currently consulting on are funded from another funding stream. So I completely take your point that it can seem like it's not working we're not being conjoined, but it's based on the funding streams, and obviously when all of those works are complete, then it will add to the overall improvement of the area. But there is works in development at the moment.
I mean, from what I've been told and what Mr Dobson is saying, it almost seems like there is some sense and some logic in delaying this while we look at the other proposal and consider them together, if you like, because they will have an impact on the whole area, because there'll be one here, and then we'll be able to see, well, do they actually meet the requirements and needs, or don't they, rather than doing one and then coming back and then something else comes along, and actually some things might come up which well, if we'd known that beforehand, we would have done something different. I'm just concerned that we don't want to sort of tackle the area's problem in two bits when we could look at it more comprehensively. And if it is, as Mr Dobson says, true that residents are not champing at the bit for this to happen and they would be prepared to wait a bit longer, it might be advisable to delay implementing this until we've looked at the other element of it. But that's just my thinking.
From my recollections of briefings, although they're two separate schemes, they were both being the effect of one on the other problem were taken into consideration.
So the Shipwrights Way scheme is, as is mentioned in the report and as Mr Dobson referred to, it is a cycling and walking route, a historic route, the way that they took the trees down from Alice Holt Forest to the dockyard. So that is more of a scenic visitor tourist attraction. And then the crossings work, the consultation that has recently been carried out is to do with access within the area and where people would like to go. So that has come out of the Old Portsmouth study, which was a large piece of work. We brought the report to Traffic and Transportation Committee about this time last year. We worked with the local community, with FUPA, and there were recommendations that came out of that as to where they would like to see crossing points and other improvements within the area. So I think officers are confident that we have, because we've already got the Old Portsmouth study and those recommendations approved through Traffic and Transportation Committee, that we have carried out that piece of work. So, although, as I said, partially related to funding, these are being presented in two separate reports and two separate work streams. They are being looked at as a whole for the area already and have been.
And I believe Steve Flynn has worked for years on it, hasn't he?
Yeah, the Old Portsmouth study that we brought, I believe it was earlier this year or late last year, was the result of several years' work.
Yes, lovely, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Heaney?
Well, yes, I mean, I obviously saw the comments about lack of engagement that Mr Dobson raised in his objection. He says previous project managers have met with all councils to discuss the different options. And it says here, I think, that basically it was decided that the TRO consultation would be the only thing that would be done in relation to this particular scheme. But again, I say, if there's another element of it, people might have a view. It's just the idea of doing it more comprehensively, but maybe better, is what I'm thinking about. And that's my concern, is we have got limited amounts of money for things, and getting it right is more important than getting it done quickly. I think that's the point that. And that's also
but there are also increasing costs.
Well, yes, I know.
It's the longer you delay something,
I do understand
the more it's going
that.
to cost.
I do understand that. But I mean, I haven't got to make the decision, so in a sense, it's quite easy for me. But that's my view on it, and I'll leave it there.
Can I just ask if this went ahead? And the other scheme as well, the options outside opposite Peacock Lane, and if they're monitored and if they're not working, it would be possible to do additional work, money, if there's funding available. Am I right or not?
Absolutely. I mean, it depends on the definition of how it doesn't work. These are access points for pedestrians to be able to use the route. None of the things that are being considered are speed reduction measures, because the last survey that we did between the 1st and 7th of May in 2021, prior to re-engaging with the ward councillors, showed that there wasn't a significant speeding problem. Now, we have a lot of anecdotal data from residents, and we do absolutely sympathise that at certain times there are vehicles that will speed in that area because it is a popular area to come and show off your cars. But overall, over a week-long survey that included nearly 14,000 vehicles each way, there wasn't a speeding problem. So these are measures that are designed to ensure that pedestrians have greater access. So as with all roads within the city, we have a feasibility process. If there's correspondence put forward and data to back that up, that there is an issue, whether it be speeding, casualties, air quality, then these will go through the feasibility process, and those with the highest priorities and that meet the council's strategic objectives will be those that are put forward for funding in the future. So nothing is impossible, it will just go through the process.
Thank you. And will there be sufficient signage so that people who want to use the Shipwrights Way know that that is the way to go? But bearing in mind, obviously, being a heritage area, you don't want, to be overburdened, if you like, with signage. But is that?
Yes, absolutely. So, as Mr. Dobson's correctly pointed out, the rest of the route is signed, and we would then look to sign this part of the route in a complementary manner to the way that the rest of the route is signed, so that if you are making that journey on foot or on cycling or scooting, then you'll be able to follow all of that. It will be similar to the English Coastal Path that we've recently signed, and we're waiting for the next stage of that.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Heaney, any more questions?
No, that's all, thank
Okay.
you.
Councillor Peter Harris.
I have a couple of questions. Firstly, if I may, I just have a couple of questions for Mr. Dobson, if possible, just on the deputation that he's given, which I believe I'm allowed understanding Order 24D.5.
I'm sure you are. I don't know anything about standing orders.
To clarify a statement that was made. Mr. Dobson, can you just clarify that when you submitted your deputation, did you actually put FUPA down as the person who submitted it?
I did. I've even got a copy of that original document, which I will be delighted to give you afterwards.
That would be grateful, thank you. So your deputation was changed to resident, am I correct?
Correct.
How many members do FUPA have?
I did say in my deputation earlier, 274 households, as that's the way we count it, and an estimate of about 350 adults.
And you're representing all those members?
Yes, that's the authority that is with the committee, just as you're representing all the members of your ward.
Thank you, Mr. Dobson. Just want that, I'm glad I've got that clarity. Appendix B, effectively, is extremely misleading to members and to members of the public, because Appendix B looks like one resident, and I'll be honest, when I read this report, I generally thought that's one very informed resident. Well, it clearly is one very informed resident on the behalf of 300 odd residents, so I think, to me, I have an issue with that in terms of the report, because I don't believe that information is fair or correct, especially from openness and transparency. I think that's an issue. And I think Mr. Dobson's raised several questions that haven't been answered in his deputation. And I'm just going to go back and have a look. You've got the sixth question, the lack of information on design constraints. So what direction was given? What conservation principles were applied? What can we provide traffic calming? What were considered on the bend? I don't think these questions have been answered nor settled. I'm not really going to ask any questions. I just have real concerns about the report, because for someone to have their details changed, I've never known that before in my life, especially on behalf of an organisation. I find that highly surprising. You can come in on that.
The details are changed to make it anonymous. It wasn't made to make it sound like it wasn't an association. It's to make you when you have these deputations, you have to remain anonymous. I cannot put Friends of Old Portsmouth on this piece of paper.
Well, I don't believe that to be true, because I've had, and I'm going to give Mr. Dobson a great example, when he's been a member of the Cycle Forum. We've had the Cycle Forum have given their views. We've had the Friends of Old Portsmouth before have given their views. We've had other associations have given their views on various different departments and different committees via the council. So I find that, I don't take that answer as a fair one. I actually think that's quite disingenuous to the gentleman we've got here. So I'm not happy with the quality of that. I think it's misleading. I don't think it's particularly fair. I think Councillor Heaney's already outlined why I think we should rethink it anyway. I don't think it's a good idea to proceed on the basis that you have considerable objections from a lot of people that actually live in that vicinity. They have concerns. They want something to happen, but they have considerable concerns about what is happening, and they've raised them in a fair manner, and it's been, quite frankly, misrepresented.
That wasn't the intention, I'll just say that.
It wasn't the intention, that is what's happened, and I wouldn't have known that today. I could have come here today and sat here and said that was one resident. Okay, we've got one resident, the majority are happy, but only because Mr Dobson's arrived here today to tell us that that's not the case, we would have been none the wiser, and I don't think that's acceptable. I really don't. I'm really displeased about that.
We will check with Democratic Services, Councillor Pater Harris, and ensure that if the title of the organisation was allowed in the report, then we will ensure that that is known. With every report, they are read through by our legal department. Obviously, comments are added, finance department, and go through briefing and Democratic Services. If there has been an error there, and when we can confirm that, we will obviously then retract that, make the necessary information known.
Well, I think it's extremely misleading, and I think in the manner of openness, honesty and transparency, I don't think that's acceptable. I really don't, and if I don't raise it now, I'm not going to raise it at all, and it's not fair on you, Chair, either, because would you have known that? I mean, I didn't know that.
Well, I do know Mr Dobson. I've known Mr Dobson for 16 years, so I know his association with and I have to admit, I just took it to be FUPA, but that Mr Dobson was writing it on behalf of FUPA. But that's just me personally, because of my own personal knowledge.
It does change the context of the report, and definitely the level of objection, because if it's the numbers of an association of the members, it's not just one person, it's much more than one person.
Can I just have a brief comment? I mean, when I read it, I thought it was a single resident, actually, when I read it, because I just saw the comment, it just said resident. I thought, oh, well, this person's obviously very, very concerned about it. And I understand why you wouldn't put a resident's details in there, and that's perfectly acceptable. I think that's a perfectly correct interpretation, because you wouldn't want to identify an individual who had objected, because it might cause problems for them. You know, they should be able to do it anonymously, and that's perfectly right. I have no problem with that at all. But I'm a bit puzzled about this notion that an organisation can't be mentioned as making a deputation, because in a sense they're not a person in the same sort of sense. It doesn't identify an individual, and if it is a group, it also makes a bit of a difference if if the group is representing and somebody is representing on their behalf, as Mr Dobson has done today as a deputation, but someone will compile it maybe on behalf of a group and send it in their own name. They're not doing it as themselves, as a quote resident, they're doing it as a group. So you don't have to mention them, but you also probably have to give the people making the decision. And if I was making the decision, I would have been misled that it was not a group. I would like to have known it was a group done on behalf of a group, because that would change the nature of the objection. It's not just a single person, it's a group of people who have concerns. So it just slightly changes the view. So I just think it just needs a bit of clarification. If we can clarify that.
I think Democratic Services and Legal have obviously missed this one, and Chai has not been given the right sort of information. So.
No, and I'm not trying to blame an individual today for that. I understand why the interpretation was made, but I just think we need some clarification about that. Yeah.
Have you got any other comments, Councillor Pater Harris?
I haven't. I'm just extremely displeased by the nature of the report, effectively, because it's misleading.
Right, but you've got no other questions? Okay, thank you. Any other comments from Michelle or Chai?
As I said, we will check with Democratic Services. Is it possible I could ask a question to Mr Dobson?
Yeah, sure.
So obviously, with this in mind, how many of the members of FUPA responded to you in order to be able to draw up this response so that we can then reflect it accurately?
We don't consult on every single thing. We produce monthly minutes, which are there for all members, in fact for all members of the public, because they go on the notice board outside the corner shop directly opposite the cathedral. So, and at AGMs, every committee member is re-elected and gets effectively it's a vote of confidence. So, because I have been in this post for about 10 years, I would say that the membership do trust me in my layperson's knowledge of the matters and also my ability to represent these to the council.
Thank you. So there was no actual consultation, there was no other responses from FUPA apart from you as a representative of the committee putting forward what you felt the society's views were?
I think actually that's rather misleading because discussed at the committee, it's also gone in those minutes and it's also been discussed with ward councillors. It is as good a sharing of information as is reasonable.
Okay, thank you very much.
Am I right in thinking the ward councillors are in favour of this being accepted? Because I haven't actually spoken to them about it.
That's correct, Councillor Stagg. We started engagement with the ward councillors in June 2021. As part of the deputation that Mr Dobson gave, he obviously referenced the fact that he felt there hadn't been sufficient consultation with outside statutory consultees, and yes, we note that point. I can give the reason for that, and that was because when we met with the ward councillors, they decided the scope of the consultation for the scheme, and the decision was made that because there was already quite a large degree of prior knowledge, and because the design was the one that met all of the requirements that we were given by both ward councillors and obviously to fulfil the objective of the scheme, that the scope of the consultation would be the TRO. Obviously the TROs are advertised publicly and on the website, so there is opportunity for all consultees to make those responses. With reference to that, if this scheme is approved, obviously we will then send the designs to all of the Sustrans and Hampshire County Council, etc.
Madam Chair, on a point of fact, that's not entirely correct because I've also been in contact with my ward councillors in preparation for this, and Councillor Holder told me that although he had been consulted about how the council would go about the consultation, he said he hadn't been briefed about the actual scheme and the safety implications.
Councillor Holder wasn't a member of the council at that time when we started having those meetings. He hasn't to date said that he hasn't requested a briefing, but we certainly will provide one for him.
Excuse me, Chair. Chair, I must mention that when we had our briefings, I did ask, had all three ward councillors been briefed on this, and I was given the answer yes, and that's clearly not the case with what I've just been told.
Well, they were, but it was not all the same councillors as now, because it would have been Councillor Wood.
It's not the point, though, is it? It's have all the councillors been consulted? I mean, we're in December. Those councillors have been elected now for over 6 months. We're making a decision. Surely they would have been briefed on the decision that's being made. I mean, I think that's quite an obvious statement of fact. You know, clearly the ward councillors haven't been consulted because Councillor Holder is not aware of it. I mean, we've been told that and we've just had it confirmed.
All councillors are consulted through the Members' Information Service, so all of the information is posted through the Members' Information Service, and if they wish to raise objections, then through that route they most certainly can, and ask for the Members' Information Service notification to be called into Cabinet for further discussion.
And that's standard. Yeah. Right, can I ask a series of questions? What happens if we postpone the decision today and to clear up the queries that have been raised, can we then resubmit it for next decision meeting? Is there time? And secondly, would that put the whole scheme then behind as far as implementation is concerned? Because I'm listening to Mr Dobson, they've been waiting for it for years. If you've been waiting that long and you want something that is absolutely right, another month is not going to make much difference, except, of course, we've got PERDA, etc., and costs are going up. So I just want to know, is it possible to adjourn it from this meeting to the next TNT meeting?
So To summarise, Mr Dobson on behalf of FUPA is asking for a raised table, and the proposed design is dropped curbs with tactile paving. So we would, if you give the recommendation that the report doesn't go through now, and that we we're allowed more time to then go back and review the design and to design a raised table in line with Mr Dobson's recommendations, then obviously we would have to put that into the works programme of the Highways Design Team. So we would have to come back to you with an estimated date of when that design was ready. If that design then made additional changes to the highway that required another TRO, then obviously we would have to put that into the work schedule of the TRO team. So I don't think at this point I could guarantee that we would come back to the next TNT meeting, because we'd have to complete those two pieces of work. If the TRO for a raised table was passed through, went through the consultation period and did not have any objections, then we don't necessarily have to bring it to TNT, because there isn't such a case to answer. So instead, we could then put through Members' Information Service that it had gone through with no objections, and we could then obviously go to tender. So yes, there would be delays, and with current inflation, we estimate at the moment it's around 11%. It could go up. Then we can't give a guarantee at the moment that the costs that we've priced up will remain the same.
Well, just to give you a bit of information, we were having some work done in my ward, and that included a raised table. And since it was first costed, the cost of the raised table has gone up by 50%, 50. And of course, it's the cost of the block paving that is costing. Right. So,
Chair, can I come back on a point?
Can I just know? Let me just finish this. So, if I say I would go ahead with this, but all the various questions, such as the ones about the residents as opposed to FUPA being sort of sorted out and made public, because if that is the case, it needs to be made public. But also, I forgot what I was going to say now. Yes. So and then it's monitored. The scheme is monitored very closely, and if it's not doing what it is meant to do, we would then look at amending. I mean, not amending the scheme, but doing something else to cover it. Because the whole point is, this is just to create. I say just, but it's to create the path, isn't it, and make it safer. But it's not about reducing speed as such. It's not as the raised tables are outside, the possibility of raised tables outside Peacock Lane. Am I right?
Yes. So this is to improve access.
Yes.
So alongside those schemes that, as you've mentioned, that are potentially raised tables at Feltham Row and at Peacock Lane, as part of the monitoring and evaluation, we would then carry out another speed set, because the speed, we have to separate the speed concerns from Shipwrights Way, because Shipwrights Way is not intended to, it may have an impact on speed, but it's not a speed reduction scheme. So as part of the monitoring and evaluation for the completed schemes within Old Portsmouth, absolutely we would carry out another speed survey, and if there was a problem with speeding, as in it was higher than the enforceable limit, then we would go through the prioritisation and feasibility process to potentially allocate funding to another scheme.
Right.
In order to reduce the speed.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay?
Yes. Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Yeah, I just wanted to think about this issue about members and who's told what. Councillor Pat Harris said that he was at the briefing, and it was said that all the ward councillors had been consulted about the proposal at some point. Councillor Holder apparently wasn't a member of the council when the consultation with councillors took place, because it was earlier, and I wasn't clear whether Councillor Holder had been informed that this work was taking place because he was new and wouldn't have known and was learning stuff. And I think there's an issue here about how we deal with members, particularly new members. You could say it's incumbent on the existing ward councillors to talk to their colleague about what's going on. But they may not have been aware that the matter was coming until the agenda was published, because I don't know how you know an item is coming to a cabinet member meeting until the agenda is published, unless somebody tells you. I don't know whether ward councillors are routinely informed when something happening in their ward is going to be coming to a traffic meeting or any other meeting for any other portfolio. It may be, a challenge to do that, because obviously it's extra work. But the question is, how do they find out? If Councillor Holder wasn't aware, if the other ward councillors weren't aware, then he's missed an opportunity maybe to find out about what's going on. He'll find out about it afterwards. It's been suggested that he could sort of ask for it to be considered by Cabinet, but I'm not sure this is a very satisfactory process, and we're also talking about the, the potential as to whether we ought to delay to consider this scheme.
I don't think we can actually take councillors by the hand and force them to read things.
Can I
just ask,
can I come back on that? Can I
Ward councillors were sort of involved in this?
So when we started...
No, what's the most recent?
I would have to come back to you on that.
Fine.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The original consultation, the original briefings were Councillor Wood, Councillor Atwell, and Councillor Holder. No, Councillor Holder isn't even the new. It's Councillor Jeffreys who is the new ward councillor, and he was appointed in May 2022. Councillor Holder has been a councillor since May 2021. So he was invited to all of the briefings, and he has been part of all of the communications. I do know that he works full time, and therefore his fellow ward councillors do pass on information.
Fine,
so it's now Councillor Jeffrey who was the one who was invited, who is the ward councillor for this area. Yes? Yes, so right. So he's the one who was the ward councillor who was consulted about it. We've clarified that. Yes. And Councillor Holder is not the ward councillor for this area, but obviously has some interest.
No, sorry. Okay, so between in the May 2021 election, Councillor Holder was elected. So when we started working with ward councillors in June 2021, Councillor Holder was a ward councillor at that time and would have been sent all of the information. And in the May 2022 election, it was Councillor Jeffreys that was elected because Councillor Wood didn't stand. So then, from then on, as I said, all of the TRO consultations are all published on members' information services. If Councillor Holder has felt that he hasn't had enough information, then we're perfectly willing to organise a briefing for him again, and the same for Councillor Jeffreys. But we haven't had any correspondence to say that that's the case, but we will most certainly follow that up.
Okay, that's clarified it, because I'm just trying to think, my view on these matters as the Traffic Transportation for Labour is if the local ward councillors are happy, then it's not for me to start saying it should be different. If they're happy, then that's their responsibility because they represent the ward. I just put my comments forward because I was thinking about whether it might be more efficient to do two things together rather than one thing and then do one thing and then maybe fix it when it doesn't work. But I'm happy to take the officer's advice on that. I was just making some queries because I wasn't at the briefing. I would have asked these questions earlier, but that's why the briefing is quite useful, because you can ask these questions and get things clarified before you come in. But when they get changed at the last minute, it's always a bit difficult. But anyway, righto.
We do have a problem, I think, on occasions when ward councillors are invited to things and then they, for whatever reason, can't go. But you can't keep following them. The officers are overworked as it is. I mean, certainly, particularly in transport with so many vacancies. So you can't just follow them all up. But I think the points that Councillor Peter Harris has made about the objection, the deputation, I think that needs to be clarified and made public. And I think the ward councillors need to be not taken to task, but sort of informed anyway of what's going on. And I'm of a mind to say to go ahead with this, but very careful, close monitoring afterwards, to make sure that what is intended is happening. And also, Mr Dobson, for you to be kept in the loop for what's going on outside the Peacock Lane, because you see that the two do work together. They're separate schemes, but they do work together from a safety point of view, because safety is priority. And Michelle in particular, I mean, Michelle has attended so many, I don't know what you call them, because we've had quite a few fatalities in the last year, and Michelle goes to those. So if anybody is really sort of aware of safety, it's Michelle. So if I say I'm happy, I'm content at the present time to accept the recommendations, but with those caveats that the wording or the report from Mr. Dobson, the deputation, is clarified that it is from FUPA, and that all the other things are sort of investigated.
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. We will definitely follow that up too.
Yeah,
and if it has been worded incorrectly within the report, then we will obviously contact Mr. Dobson and Councillor Pater Harris and ensure that they're made fully aware of,
Yes, and I think we should
whether or not.
speak to Democratic Services and Legal that they have actually missed that.
I don't think we can comment on it until we've made that follow-up correspondence,
Precisely,
but we will definitely
Yeah.
follow that up as soon as possible. And if there has been an error on whomever it was within the report, then obviously we will make sure that is acknowledged and it doesn't happen again.
Absolutely.
Councillor Stagg, may I just ask that if this is agreed to be the case, the public record is changed, so that means that the report that is uploaded on the council website is amended.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can do that. Thank
Totally
you.
agree. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Dobson. The last one, I think, I'm very aware of the time, is item number 6, which is the feasibility scheme prioritisation process. And who's presenting that? Is that you, Joe? Thanks.
Good evening. This report is for information only and outlines the recently updated transport and infrastructure feasibility process. Numerous requests are received through various channels from residents, councillors and stakeholders for transport measures to be looked into and delivered, so a more formal, robust and detailed approach was required. All requests received are added to a detailed list to then be reviewed and scored against the Portsmouth Transport Strategy strategic objectives to contribute to the Portsmouth Transport Strategy vision, and resources are focused as such. Consideration is also given to other factors such as safety improvements and linkages to other schemes to be delivered. Undertaking feasibility work will provide more certainty over what can be achieved from the data gathered, the outlined design options and the cost estimates produced. It should be noted that where proposals are approved to progress to feasibility, this is neither a commitment to deliver the scheme nor to fund the delivery of works. Upon completion of feasibility work, the prioritised scheme proposals can then be taken forward either through future internal capital bidding rounds or opportunities for external funding. A mailbox has been created to receive requests from residents with the email address which is included in the report, which is transportfeasibilityrequests@portsmouthcc.gov.uk. Or there is now a slightly shorter email address of transportrequests@portsmouthcc.gov.uk. And we're also in the process of making this available online. We're preparing a page for the website to summarise the process, and it will include a link to the email address so that we can receive requests from residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Pater Harris.
Yeah, no, I think this is a welcomed report, Chair. I mean, we spoke about this, I think, quite a few times now, yourself and Councillor Heaney. I just want to say thank you to Bethan and Joe for bringing the report, because it's really good. And, I think it's something that we've needed to do for a long time to actually ensure that there's transparency around how requests come in, how they're categorised, what's the score, how they're reviewed, and then the funding request. So I think there's now a method that can be shared with members as well. I think that's important. What I am keen to see, though, if possible, for example, the feasibility scheme list, when that gets updated, I think it's going to get updated regularly. So could that be sent out to members as well? I think because I'm quite happy, obviously, if it's come to the opposition spokesperson and we can cascade it to our groups. I think that's a sensible way to do it. And so obviously it keeps it very much within our power and within our remit. But I like it. It's a good report. I think it's a good way of working as well, to ensure that obviously there are schemes that do go ahead, we can actually pinpoint them, or for example the schemes that don't go ahead for whatever reason because of funding issues, well actually we can't do it this year but we may be able to do it next year, so it gives a good idea of the journey that the council's going on, especially when I think one of the big issues, Councillor Stagler, I don't know if you would agree, is I think we do a lot of change here but we don't actually take people on the journey enough. And I think that's important about if we can actually prove to people where we're going and why we're doing it. And, you know, I really welcome it. It's a really good report. So, you know, I'm really, really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I welcome the report as well, and we've had a very useful briefing with all three of us where officers went through some of the issues. It's really useful to see that. And we have to recognise that these issues about requests from members, requests from the public are a living thing, and they change, and they may well change depending on what comes in, and that's good to know. And I think residents also, it gives us the tools to say to residents, actually, you know, we know how the process works, and we see how it changes, and to be able to say to them, well, actually, you know, something could come in later. You were in the earlier list, but something coming later was more urgent, and it's proved because we've done the necessary work, and it helps in explaining why things happen, when things happen, and it helps us to do our job in that respect. I mean, I'm assuming we're using this sort of like as of now. I mean, what I also think is important when we do reports, and this is a sort of observation, is that we sort of not put every single detail in, but actually basically show our homework, you know, how we've got to the decision, and that we don't just say, well, there's a recommendation to do this and this, but we actually show how we got there, and so it actually demonstrates to the public transparently how we've gone there. So we may actually show when the report was written, this was what the current priority list looked like. It probably after the report's finished, and whether it might change. But at the time the decision was made, it was made on that basis because that was the information we had, and that was appropriate. And then it means, you know, we can justify it really clearly. So yeah, that's all I will say. As it's getting late, I'll shut up now and let everyone go.
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I mean, and I think it covers a lot of things as well, because we have so many requests now. Michelle has masses of requests for speed surveys, etc. And then obviously there are things like clusters of accidents in particular places. So all those things then can actually be given a weighting. But also, of course, it's for what Martin Lavers calls shovel-ready schemes, which I love that. So that if so much of transport relies on bidding for funding from outside, and if you've got a very good bid, you get the money. But that depends on having a pretty good idea of a scheme before you actually send it in. So having feasibility of any particular scheme, you've got an idea, and then take it forward. That gives you a head start, because I think that's one of the reasons we've won so much money this year, isn't it? Because doing these bids takes forever and a day, and they're not easy. But having the bones of something, and then you can add the sort of the meat to it later. So it covers a whole load of things, and I think it's definitely the way to go. So, yes, thank you, Joe. Very good. And I think that's it, is it? Thank you all for your time, and I'm sorry it's quite late. Can we go back to a 4 o'clock meeting from now on, please? Thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Now the new teaching block's coming in, it probably be possible, yeah. But it's just that.
Pardon?
Now the new teaching block is coming in January, it probably be possible. I'm checking my timetable.
It's just people like Peter, because he lives in Sunderland.